everyone, it's Lorelai. In this episode, I wanted to go over how I made the cooldown system for Deirdre's jump ability. Let's take a look at that again. So here we go, we're jumping, and then as you can see, a timer starting from I think 15, and then the background of her ability kind of turns brown, and let's wait for it to finish. And then it turns back to blue. If it's on cooldown and I switch over to another character, I'm switching over to a bunch of characters and then back to Deirdre, it is where it still should be. Okay, so it doesn't pause, it doesn't finish, right? So it continues the correct cooldown. That starts from jump target. So once she stuns and finishes this little sequence, she's going to turn on jump cooldown initialize, which is on a special object called Deirdre cooldowns, and it's also going to turn on jump cooldown on another special object called action button background. Okay, so let's take a look at background because that's very simple. So we've got this background action button thing here, which seems a little silly, and I don't know if I'm gonna do it, but basically the hop image is transparent, and then the background, the purple here, is actually this object back here. And then when I hold down Q, it's going to turn into that blue navy color, and then when it's on cooldown, it's going to turn into that brown color. Okay, so simply from idle, it changes to right, and the cooldown is on, jump cooldown is on, it changes to brown, and then when the cooldown is off, it changes back to idle. If the Q button is pressed, it'll turn to blue, and then when it's released, it'll turn back to purple. Easy stuff. The biggest thing here, I guess, is Deirdre cooldowns. Deirdre cooldowns is actually, I think it's part of action bar. Yes, so action bar is this whole thing, which you can't really see. Okay. Okay, is this guy, is this graphic? Okay, so the action bar. I've decided to just add the cooldowns as object connections to this action bar, just because it's already on the menu, and these cooldowns kind of need to be active almost all the time, so we can track who has, you know, a cooldown like all the time, despite who is active or not active. So I have it connected to action bar under object connections. So we've got Deirdre cooldowns. I do want to put this on a switch eventually. The switch would be not cooldown initialize. It would be Deirdre has any cooldown at all would be my switch. But it's not really a big deal. It's just an object that's not really doing anything. So it's not really hogging the game too much. I'm not that worried, but eventually I will want to add a switch to optimize the game's performance. But for now, it's just adding Deirdre cooldowns, and Deirdre cooldowns is just chilling the entire game, just invisible. It's invisible until something happens. Until what happens? Until this guy happens. Jump cooldown initialize is on. And so I plan on putting all of her abilities here. So this is Q. I'm going to put the E ability here, and then her R ability up here, or whatever. But right now we just have Q. So if jump cooldown initialize switch turns on, then we are going to spawn a new child. We're going to make a baby called jump cooldown. And then I'm turning off that switch so that I can go back to idle without it, you know, switching back and forth. So let's look at jump cooldown. Jump cooldown is the actual timer. And jump cooldown is going to be on the screen all the time. Same with how Deirdre cooldown is on the screen all the time. I wanted jump cooldown to be on the screen all the time, despite who the main character is, and to be specific only to jump, right? Because we want multiple abilities to be on cooldown if she uses them all, right? That makes sense. So anyway, first we are starting the cooldown, which is just turning on this switch, which is the action button cooldown switch to on. We already have this being turned on from the actual jump target ability down here, but I'm turning it on again, I think because during my testing, one or the other didn't work. So we just have it on twice. Then we're going into the actual timer. So the first thing that we're doing is we're turning on cooldown text, which I'll show you in a sec. This is the switch, cooldown text. And then we're starting a timer. we are going to count down from 15, and the variable is set to my cooldown object self timer variable, rather. Okay, so we're counting down from 15. Eventually, I'd like to set it by variable, okay, because I think that'd be pretty cool and it'd be very easy to do. In fact, I could probably use a database to decide like what the timer is, but right now I don't mind setting it manually to 15. Okay, let's look at cooldown text. We are turning on cooldown text, which is this thing, another object connection. We are just making all the babies here. So here we're gonna have another child object, but this one is set to a switch so that when this switch turns off, this also disappears, which was pretty important in being able to switch characters, switch your main character, and then remove the actual text that is appearing, the cooldown text, which is the countdown. So let's look at jump cooldown text. It's pretty simple. It doesn't even have names here. Starts at idle and it switches over to actions 1. I should name that. If the current main character is not Deirdre, or if my parent's cooldown is set to 0. So if my timer is 0. And so this I think should be called turn off text. Okay, so an idle will be show text. Okay, so all of the content of this is basically up here under display. We are displaying the cooldown of the parent. It says object self, but it's actually the parent. Select variable of parent object with the same name. I don't know why they did it like that, but they did. So jump cooldown's timer is cooldown, right? So we're showing this as text on this object. And then when that finishes, or if, I'm not Deirdre anymore, if it finishes or if I'm not Deirdre, then I'm going to destroy it. And I'm going to turn that cooldown text switch here off. And this is also being destroyed. And if I put the variable of cooldown on this item, on this object, it would still appear if I was on Nisha or Belle or Fiona, which I didn't want. I wanted it to disappear. So that's why I have the cooldown text on a totally different object that will disappear when this cooldown is up, and then just destroy when it's done, when the cooldown reaches 0. I say less than or equal to 0 just in case, because you never know. So I set it to 0. We're turning off all of the switches, and then we're destroying the object. And then we're just back to regular old Deirdre. I have this return text here. This is if the left stick is pressed. So if I am Deirdre and then I click Nisha, which is left stick up is pressed or something like that. If I end up going back to Deirdre, this is just turning the cooldown text switch back to on, and then it's going back to idle. Okay, because if I switched over to Nisha, that would be this variable happening, not this one where the current main character is not 1 anymore. So then it would turn off the text and turn off that switch. But then we turn it back on. It's a little, they're all like kind of relying on each other here, the 3 of them. And eventually I'll have more of these cooldown objects for all of my abilities. I think that's it for cooldowns. It's not terribly complicated. Of course, it just takes some time to set up. And I think I'll be able to apply it for all of my abilities, fingers crossed, again. So yeah, I will talk to you guys later. Bye!